Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Tracy and I'm your host. The purpose of my channel is to create readings that provide support, guidance, and or insight to those who are in need of it and or seeking it. So welcome, as usual. This is my second official video. The first one, the topic that we chose to do a reading on was the spring equinox, and that did go well. It's interesting. It's the first day of spring, but it is snowing outside where we are. I'm in Canada, and so it's snowing. So it doesn't feel much like spring, and it certainly the winter needs to move itself out. So the spring weather, because the spring energies are here, and henceforth probably why it's snowing, to bring those spring energies in. That's just a footnote, I guess, is that anytime there's active weather, that is new energies or energies coming to the planet. So thunderstorms, heavy rainfalls, torrential downpours, blizzards, hot weather, then followed by a couple of, one day later it's like 10 degrees colder or 10 degrees warmer. That is active weather, and that is bringing new energies forward. So although I thought this video was going to be on a different topic, I just thought I would add that in as an ad lib. So in my readings, and today's topic is going to be about bullying, and I'm not going to pinpoint victims or the actual bully or anything like that. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to speak with Whitehawk, who is my spirit guide, who is a Ojibwe chief, and I'm going to channel him. And in channeling, what it is that I go and I get him, and much like you pick up the phone and call someone or go knock on their door, I go call Whitehawk, and Whitehawk comes, and then I speak to him, and he is my elder, and he delivers a message to me, which then I deliver to you. So you may call me a bridge, you may call me a messenger. In the end, I'm a channeler. So he's a very wise person. Excuse me. And so I invite you to partake and to listen to what he says. Try it on, see if it fits, see if it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, great. Thank you for coming, for listening. But if it does fit, see how that works. If you join, come back, join us again, see what else we have to say. Leave comments. Please keep it clean. Be kind. There's too much negativity in this world. We're here to make an optimistic, a positive change in the world. So I will go get Whitehawk, and I will see what he has to say in regards to bullying. Indeed, he says, bullying. He says it is an awful, awful, awful thing. He says, I'm so sorry that any of us or all of us have ever had to go through it. He says, and certainly through the ages and the years, he says, we all know someone or something or somehow we've all been affected by it, he says. And so what I want to say to you, he says, in regards to bullying is simply this. Just know, he says, that you are loved, my child. For the Lord, he says, loves us all as one, he says. Oh, sorry, there's a garbage truck going by, and so sometimes that can distract me, so forgive me, but I'll just go back in. He says, Indeed, he says, we are all loved as one, he says, by our Lord, our Father, Jesus Christ, he says. And so what I would say to you, he says, if you are the victim of bullying, he says, then indeed you must speak up, he says, today, not tomorrow, he says. Because in speaking up today, he says, it will make a huge, huge difference. And there is a little boy that is standing to his side. He was probably just a boy, anywhere from 4, 5, 6, 7 maybe. And Whitehawk goes over to him and he kneels down and comes down to his level. And he says, my son, I speak for you and I speak for all children. He says, your age, all genders, he says, all nationalities, all ethnicities, when I say this, my child. He says, if you were to look to the Lord above, you will know, he says, that you are loved wholeheartedly. But he says, my child, what I need to express to you and what you need to do, he says, is you need to tell your parent. He says, and if it is your parent that is doing the bullying, he says, then you need to tell another parent, he says, or you need to go tell another adult, he says, so that you may immediately get the help that you require. He says, my child, you have done nothing wrong. He says, my child, the person doing wrong is the person bullying you. Never think, he says, that there is something wrong with you, my child, for there is not. He says, the person who is bullying you has just not been shown, he says, how to behave properly. And so he says, in order for them to learn how to behave properly, they need to be told, he says, that they are behaving improperly. He says, you are not the source of the problem, my child. You never have been. You never will be. He says, the source is within them, he says. It is not within you. The source of the problem is what he's speaking of. He says, the source of the problem is from within them, not from within you. This person, he says, has never been shown and was not taught, he says, how to handle such flagrant, he says, emotions. And this person needs to learn, he says, how to be shown how to handle such emotion. He says, and they must learn how to treat humans with kindness and respect. It is not you, my child. I cannot reflect upon that nor say that. Moreover, he says, it is not you. He says, so he kisses the top of the child's forehead. He says, be blessed, my child. Go tell your parent or another guardian. Quick, be quick about it, he says. And so the child turns and he goes off running and hopefully to tell a parent or a guardian. And then he stands up and he speaks as though he's speaking to a crowd, an audience. And he says, as well for you, my children, he says. And it's not children, he says, for they are older, they are adults, such as you and I. And he says, as well for you, my children. He says, the source, the root of the problem, he says, is not you, and never has been, and never will be, he says. The source of the problem, he says, is greed. If you are dealing with challenges, he says, with greed, he says, then you need to listen and heed this, he says. The issue is not you. It never has been, never will be. I cannot say that again. Moreover, he says. The issue is them. He says, always has been, always will be. He says, he's standing up tall. He's a very tall man. He's about 6 foot, 6'1". And he says, I too, he says, have been bullied. He says, if you think of my ancestors who have been here before, have we not been bullied? He says, we have been bullied many a times over to get off our land, to shut down what that it is, he says, that we believe in. We have been bullied. He says, But I have returned. We have returned. My people have returned, he says. And we are not the source of the problem. We never have been, he says. So for you, my children, the wondrous children of God, he says, all I can say for you is that you are not the source or the root of the problem. He says, and when bullying takes effect, he says, it creates staggering low self-esteem, he says, because we tend to reflect and take it inward, he says. We take it inward and we say, well, it must be us, because I never see him or her or them behave like that around anyone else. So it must be me that is creating the problem. No, my child, he says. It is not your problem. It is their problem. Always has been, always will be. It is their source. It is they who need to relearn to behave properly. He says, and so for those people, he says, who have made a career, a lifestyle, he says, out of bullying, he says, they know no other way, he says, to get what it is that they want. But I assure you, and heed my words, he says, when they go to bed at night, they do not sleep well. For how could they, when they have treated you so badly? He says, how could they, when they know that when they were treated such as that, it did not feel good? So you must know and you must allow it, he says, to reside in your heart, that they are the source of it. Never turn it, he says, because someone's about to speak up and say, well, I'm not all that great, I do behave badly, and he stops them. No. He says, if you have ever been treated badly, he says, it does not matter what you have done, he says, the reality is it's in how they have behaved in return. He says, if a parent scorns a child, and he says, indeed, that is the most difficult job of all, he says, they must temper it. They must, he says. Otherwise, it just grows and grows and grows. He says, and so this is a topic, he says, I could speak hours upon. We could be here hours, he says, but I do not have hours. I have minutes. He says, and so that is why I have made it very emphasizing, he says, ever so much, he says, that you realize that it's not you, it is them. But the reality is, they will never realize it is them. And perhaps I should not say never, he says, but for as long as you keep thinking it's you, and don't point out to them that it is them, or they, he says, they will never change. And he says you cannot change them until they are ready to change. And henceforth, he says, in order for them to change, big things have to come forward, he says. And oftentimes, he says, it can be that indeed they do something that is against the law. And finally someone decides, he says, to lay down the law, to call the law, to enforce it, he says. And oftentimes that is the only way they begin to change, because they realize their game is up. They can no longer get away with it. For as long as they keep making you think you are the source and root of the problem, their game never has to change. He says, so from me to you, to all those people who are suffering badly, he says right now, I want to offer you this. I want you to all rise up. And as he says that, I see, so there's like a circle of people. I see this tremendous amount of energy just rise up from out of all these people. He says, I want you to all rise up, he says, and I want you to take each other's hands. So everybody grabs each other's hands. And it's quite something to see if you're from where he says, and all I hear now is the song, all we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. And so you can see the lines like swaying back and forth as the music plays, and then they also start to partake in the singing, and their voices, get stronger, and they become more confident as they're singing, and while the energy is just brilliant as it pours out from their bodies and the tops of their head, and almost it's like creating this aurora borealis above them. It's absolutely spectacular. And he says, you see? He's like talking to me, talking to you guys. He says, do you see? Do you see the power that you have within yourself, he says, to create glorious things? He says, do you see? And we're seeing and we're watching this beautiful energy and the beautifulness of like the aurora borealis into the sky. He says, so my children, be free and know that you have the power to be free, and that we, as he's pointing to we, as in the people in heaven, we and my partners in heaven, my family, he says, will always be here for you. All you need to do is ask and listen, and we will be here for you, he says, and you can and will be free. And they're singing away. And he says, and so, my child, to you, Tracy, to those listening, he says, be free. And it is them. It is not you. I hope these words ring true for you, he says. God bless. Just knock, he says, and I'll be there. God bless. Sometimes I think I forget that the video was running. So that ends the session on bullying, and that was done by Whitehawk. So I hope that has brought some comfort and solace to any and all of you who have suffered in the hands of bullies. God bless. I wish you well, and I hope to see you back here again. Take care.